him.
I want to watch the news.
Are you making headway at least?
This is the news.
Schmack-a-mug-up, it's time for the only news that matters. And Yngwie Malmsteen, yes, I already did part 1 of this, where Yngwie Malmsteen talks about different artists and little stories about each of them. And on this episode, it's going to be Metallica, Brian May, David Lee Roth, Angus Young, and Brian Johnson. Let's stop there, because then the next one will be Gene Simmons and Eddie Van Halen. Alright, so okay, Metallica. The Alcatraz thing, I wouldn't say it was really big, but we had a lot of money behind us. I found out later that it was all embezzled money, but we had first class airplane tickets, limos, everything. And we'd go up to San Francisco all the time to take a picture of Alcatraz. You know, the Alcatraz Island, things like that. But one time when we were there, I went out on the scene, and it was all bands like Exodus and Armored Saint, and they were talking about a new band, Metallica. This was 1983, before they had made it. But I ended up at Metallica's place, which was a little house, and we were jamming, and everybody was really, really drunk. A few times after that, I would bump into them at the Rainbow when they were in LA, and they would come back to my house, and we'd listen to Deep Purple, and they would bang their heads on the floor to the music. Plus, you know, I'm Swedish, and Lars Ulrich is Danish. It's the same language, just a different accent, basically. Different dialect. So we had that. All right, there you go, man. A little Metallica story. Yngwie was around when Cliff was there, man. 83 was, no, Dave was already gone by then, right? Or was he fired in 83? I don't know. Either way, he hung out with early Metallica when he was in Alcatraz. There you go. All right, the next one. Brian May. He said, I was playing guitar at this place in Frankfurt, which is like a European equivalent of the NAMM show. I was in this little cubicle at one of the stands, just playing. And when I kept hearing somebody in the back of the room going, who's that? What the fuck? He was freaking out about my guitar playing. I didn't know who it was at first. Then later I realized it was Brian May from Queen. He came up to me afterwards and we basically became really friendly. We went to dinner and everything. He was super nice, so I spent a lot of time with him. We hung out a few times in England too. Alright, there's the Brian May story. Wow. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Yngwie and I'm a huge fan of Brian May. They both have that instinct sound, man. When you hear them, you know it's them. And wow, talk about joining forces there, huh? Too bad Brian May and Yngwie didn't do some recording like Brian May did with Eddie Van Halen. All right, next, Diamond, David Lee Roth. He said, in 1985, I did a headliner tour of the United States, and I had an opening band called Talus, which was Billy Sheehan's band. David Lee Roth used to come to the shows, and I knew him because I used to hang out with him at the Troubadour. We would party together. He was a cool guy. He would come to the shows, and he always had advice. I remember he would tell me, I've been reading so many interviews, you're doing it all wrong, he would say. Don't talk like that. Don't say these things. And I said, okay, thank you for the advice. He's funny as shit, that guy. He's a motor mouth. Anyway, it was pretty clear at the time that he was either out of Van Halen or just about out. And I suppose I was one of the hottest guys in the scene at the guitar players. So he was eyeing me out for that. He wasn't blatant about it, but he was definitely wanting to see if I wanted to do it. All right, there you go. I don't know if David Lee Roth wanted Yngwie, really. he probably would have wanted Yngwie if Yngwie didn't make a mark yet. Then, yeah, it would have been wise. Like, if he wasn't in Steeler or Alcatraz, and at that time, Rising Force, it would have been a wise move. But by then, he had the name and stuff, and Steve Vai was more of a bubbling, guitar player, Frank Zappa and Flexible, a couple of his early stuff, and the Alcatraz stuff, but it didn't really take off like Yngwie at the time, so I think it was wise that he kept Steve Vai in the band, but I think it was a huge mistake getting rid of Billy Sheehan and Skyscraper. I mean, he should have kept in the vein of Eat 'em and Smile, take a little bit of a left turn, but man, on Skyscraper he did a U-turn, but I've talked about that before. All right, the last one, Angus Young and Brian Johnson. He said, I did 4 months opening for AC/DC on the Fly on the Wall tour. By the way, side note, I saw that tour twice. Once at the LA Forum in 1985, and then at the Hollywood Sportatorium in 1985. I was in California at the time when Fly on the Wall played there, and then when I came back home, a couple months later, they played the Sportatorium, and I caught that tour twice. And he says, me and Angus and Brian became really close, hanging out all the time. Brian's a car guy like me, and back then I was driving a Jaguar E-Type with a V12 engine, and he had a Jaguar E-Type with a 6-cylinder engine. And I would say, I got 12, and he would say, well, this one's the original one. Angus, we just sit and jam on stuff. I took one of my guitars and said, hey, Angus, I got an idea for you. The chords A, C, D, C. And I played this progression, and he goes, well, I already did that. And we always joking around like that. Super nice people. I love them. There you go, man. Want to talk about a contrast. Yngwie Malmsteen and Angus Young. But both, man, any way you slice it, man, Angus Young was a shredder. The guy shredded. The guy was amazing. And I'm sure, even though he's not at that peak league as Yngwie, Yngwie has to respect Angus Young as a guitar player because he's so real. It's so organic. It's so rock and roll. You know what I mean? Probably the most rock and roll guitar player ever, I think, is Angus Young. And blistering solos. They may not be Yngwie solos, but they're blistering nonetheless. Anyway, so there you go. That is Yngwie Malmsteen's Stories Part 2. There will be a Part 3 with Gene Simmons and Eddie Van Halen. On Eddie Van Halen, it says parentheses next to it, almost. So, I don't know, maybe he didn't meet Eddie Van Halen. We'll find out on the next story. But thank you so much for watching The Only News That Matters. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Ring that little notification bell, and hey, leave comments below what you feel about all this. I'd love to know. And like the video. It's awesome for the YouTube algorithms. So stay frosty. Listen to Marching Out from Yngwie J. Malmsteen's Rising Force, and smack 'em a gob.
Farewell and adieu to you fair Spanish ladies. Farewell and adieu, you ladies of Spain. For we've received orders for to sail back to Boston. And so never more shall we see you again.